What do you call this animal? Because depending on who you ask, you might get a completely different answer. Welcome to this episode of Pandora through a biologist's eyes. For this episode, we're going to talk about something that is a little bit different, or a little less world exploration, a little more explanation. Because what we're going to talk about today is names. So when you hear names, it's something pretty much common. Like a name is something that defines someone, and it can define something. For example, we humans, we like to name things. Like we name our pets. We like to name rock formations. Names are something that describes something. But the problem with names is they have different meanings. So naming itself can be a bit of a problem because, of course, being on an alien planet, we have alien people here, the Navi. And of course, they have been there before. And it's the same, of course, with animals and plants on Earth. They have names given to them by people in the language that has been spoken there. So usually, if you have different languages, the animals have different names. Let's take, for example, a squirrel. In German, it's Eichhörnchen. I think in the Romanic languages like Italian, it's like squiatolo. And then, of course, we got squirrel. So they are usually taken from something and then just renamed, or depending on that's the languages I know. If you have a Hindi speaker, squirrel probably is something completely different. So what we have, of course, are different languages. It can also be a problem when we talk about an animal. For example, like a raccoon is called a raccoon, but the German translation is like a washing bear, which, sounds weird. And if you try to explain it to someone that has never seen a raccoon before, try to explain the animal. So the problem we have with, names and languages, of course, it is a little bit of a problem because we have this language barrier. So if you have indigenous names for something, as you have with the Navi languages, I go based on of what I've seen in the movies and what I've experienced in the games and from some quick look around, I guess. The Navi speak only one language, at least the ones that we've seen, because they did not have any trouble, understanding each other. And from what I've seen from the movies and the games, they are kind of just no dialect as well. So they didn't give the Metkaina from the ocean tribe, they didn't give them would be funny, a Russian accent, but no, they didn't. Think of Game of Thrones, the North has kind of this Scottish accent a little bit going on, but they don't have that in the Pandora world. Which, of course, with Pandora having this big, comprehensive hive mind system with Ewa that stores information and memories to a certain degree, so maybe it's not necessary to have different languages because you more or less can plug into Ewa, and you've got this interconnected system, kind of like how mushrooms and fungi connect trees. Well, it's a whole other story, though. I have not gotten into a deep dive because I know there is so much confirmed lore in interviews, but I digress. But when we come to names, we all have names. We give our pets names. It's something that we do. And when we talk about names, of course, we have different languages, as I just said so. But also, if you have animals people that speak the same language, there's different names for them as well, which are usually then common names. Because when I say the name of the animal elk, what comes to mind? Depending on which part of the world you're from, you'll see completely different animals. So this animal is an elk, but this animal is also an elk. And one of them is called moose in North America. And that naming issue comes because the animals already had names because they were found in Europe. So an elk was found in Europe. It was a big deer. So when people traveled into the Americas, and they say people, I'm going to use, the European settlers, they traveled over there and they saw these big deer that they knew from stories, and elk, moose are the biggest deer species in the world. And they saw ooh, big deer. We're going to call them, those must have been, the elk we have on the continent as well. But the elk that they saw are not even that close to a European elk, because they're mostly closer to the red stags or red deer. So we had a naming issue there. When they then later found out there were some actual elk there, they called them moose. So in German-speaking media, or as far as I'm aware, I tend to call the American elk a wapiti, because that's, I think it's part of don't ask me which language family. I'm not that good with languages, I'm sorry. But it means white rump. So that is a pretty unique name for it, which is using the local names, of course. Another example is the word magpie. if you think of a magpie, what comes to mind? You've got the Australian magpie, and of course you've got the called quote-unquote original Eurasian magpie. It's just like, black and white bird. It's gonna be called a magpie. It's also like how we like to name things. Like we see this big gray thing in the water, let's call it a sea cow. So if we come to the how animals are named, usually in science you have a scientific name. And that scientific name is unique to this only one species. So if you think of a scientific name, the two animals that people know the full scientific name of are, of course, the boa constrictor and Tyrannosaurus rex. So if we look at those two names, if we look just at Tyrannosaurus, so the first name that you see in front is the genus name. So there could be multiple Tyrannosauruses, but there's only one Rex. So Rex is the species name. Or if we look for the human equal, so Homo sapiens, that's us humans. But then we have like Neanderthals. They also belong to the genus of Homo, but they are a different species. I think it is Neanderthalensis. So if you would say like, oh, all humans, since we're the only last ones alive, it is, okay, they mean us. But if you talk like in a historic sense, like, oh, yeah, ancient humans, okay, which ones? That's why you have to specify that. But on Pandora, being like an alien planet, and of course, as you have it usually when people come and send explorations to something, they find usually different animals, and these animals already have a name in their native tongue, of course. And if we look on the Pandoran animals, and we look, for example, here at our Thanator, it already has a Navi name, and that is Palulukan. Okay, I'm really sorry about, pronouncing it. What is interesting here with our Thanator, if you look at this, it says Bestia panthera ferox. That would be its scientific name. So Bestia panthera is the genus, and ferox is the species. And with what's interesting I've noticed about this game, this Thanator, the Thanator in general, is the only animal in the whole Hunter's Guide that has it like this. Because if we look at the dire horse, it has a Navi name, but no taxonomy name. Storm glider, because the others apparently did not have them when I looked through, it has this Magnus Teratorn. Has taxonomy there. But first off, the M in the beginning is capitalized. So the genus letter, the first genus letter is always capitalized. And I'm pretty sure it is the other way around, so it would be Teratorn Magnus, so big capital T, because this is the prefix. So scientific names are always made up from either Greek or Latin variations, and it can be to describe something. For example, if you would have, Tyrannosaurus, terrible lizard, and Rex means king. So that's something to describe it. It could also be like you name it after something, like I think it's one of the Pachycephalosaurus, or Cephalo if you want to pronounce the C2K. They named it after Hogwartsy or something. But it's also interesting because I know in the movies they call the Ikran Banshee, or Banshee. So they use mountain Ikran. It's a mix out of the native word for it, Ikran, but they also call it a Banshee. It does not seem to have a taxonomy, so that Hunter Guide is really, I'd say, like from a scientific point of view, garbage. Yeah, for this one again, this is the sailfin Goliath, and here we see the taxonomy, and it's first off, the Anthomedusae would be the genus, and it should be in front, and then Pacificus should have an A ending, Pacifica, because it is always the species name adapted to fit the gender of the first name. So of course, if you're English speaking, you might not know that words have genders, but if you're usually, I think, pretty sure that I'm very, very sure that at least all of the Romanic languages coming from Latin, they all have genders. Male, female. So an A ending usually indicates the word is female, and then us ending is usually for, of course, a male. So you'd have the ending. So it would be Pacifica. And with the cloaked panther right here, I have noticed something else. So taxonomy says Volatilis echinonyx. So echinonyx already exists. Echinonyx is the genus name of our earth cheetah. So that is something you cannot do. You cannot use a genus name in the species name if it has nothing to do with the species. It needs to be its own separate genus, because that cloaked panther, since it's an animal from another planet, in no way related to our earth cheetah. So you could give it anything else, but genus name is untouchable in this point, because genus is something that fixed, because it's a genus that already exists, and therefore you cannot use that. If you name something, or an animal is discovered, and of course usually the animals have already been discovered by people that live in the area, which is why if they send out excursions into hidden spots in the tropics, they usually ask local people, because especially people that live close to nature, if you have like more indigenous people that are grown up in those forests, say, I don't know, in the middle of the Amazon, they usually see animals, so they are a big help to locating these animals. And then when you discover they have not been described yet, that is something that is really interesting, because of course the animal has been known to people for a long time, but it has not yet been described. So once an animal is described, it's gonna get published, and they're gonna have the proposed name in there. And the thing is, if another paper should surface from, I don't know, let's say like even decades or centuries ago, that the animal has already been named, then the older name wins. So it's usually first come, first serve when it comes to naming animals. Other than that, of course, I can discover a species of cheetah and put it in a completely different genus. It doesn't work this way. Another thing is here with the taxonomy, showing that it's all over the place, because it says taxonomy and it's more or less just a broad description with some so I think these are all Latin or to some degree Greek, but if you would have three like this, first off, Ceratomeorph pretty sure would be the genus again. If you would have two species and the other, that means subspecies. So it is, the whole Hunter's Guide is not very well thought through, because it would be great if they had like, the taxonomic name there, having a full scientific name there, but that it's just like, one time is this, one time is this, so that's something that kind of annoys me. Another thing I've noticed, they haven't really taken care of their plants, because a scientific name is something that of course describes any type of living species that we have on Earth, and may it be a bacteria or a plant, a fungus, any type of animal, be it a fly, I don't know, some kind of cat, they all have a scientific name. And they get described a scientific name, so it is this specific thing. Because if I say, oh, a cat over there, of course, that could be, depending on the context of where I am, could be like multiple animals. It could be, of course, my house cat that is sitting right next to me and being quiet for once. It could also be, if you're, I don't know, on safari in Africa, say, oh, look, the cat over there. Could be a leopard, could be a lion. And if you say, oh, I want to pet that cat, always be careful what cat you're meaning. So, you see the thing what I meant with names, that names can have different meanings. And names can show different meanings, of course. So it's important that you have the names. Of course, having what, the Navi people call them, it's important too, because if you would try, like what you do when you go on excursions and you try to ask the people in the area for help, it's good that you know the common name for it, like what people call it in the area. And then it can help you, because they usually know best, first of where to find them, and what it is, and they can help you find them too. So having good contact with local people and local communities is really, really important for not only like discovering new species, but also protecting them. Because if you show them and you talk about this, they can help you find them. And then you can also try to cover the importance. So this is another example for something that already exists, and that is Lacerta, and that is the genus name for small lizards that are all over big parts of Europe. So it doesn't work this way. And here is something interesting again, because you've seen those two animals, and this one has the same genus name. So if we follow the Earth rule and the scientific standard, that means they are the same genus. And of course, different animals, even if they look different, they can't be the same genus, but genus is kind of like a very close relationship. And they could be far enough away, so you just can't assume they're the same genus, because if I just look at them, my opinion that viper wolf looks closer, or that scarab faller and the whipfang crawler, they also look, of course, very close. You could, put these two in the more or less same genus name. Again, it already exists, so it wouldn't work this way. But I wouldn't put that Jotun near them, just by going off looks. But yeah, so naming things, and again, I am very, very basic. I am by no means an Avatar universe expert. I have not watched every interview on it. I don't do deep dives into the Avatar lore, so for those videos I go off stuff that I've noticed, stuff that I've read about in the the game declarations, things that are just like from a scientific and biological, ecological set make sense. So that's how I operate. So if I'm sorry if I don't go into deep lore or I've missed like the, I don't know, 500, one of the 500 interviews or whatever, or like I don't have the deep dive wiki stuff. But from what I've noticed with the Hunter's Guide, so the naming, I mean, this one, the Venator again, has a somewhat valid taxonomic scientific name. But all of the other animals in this Hunter's Guide, where you would have a complete description, because if you pick up a guide or a lexica, whatever, any kind that's like, shows you animals and plants, you always have a common name, multiple common names, sometimes in different languages, and you always have the scientific name there. And I can guarantee you, because I don't think Avatar isn't like, 1,000 years in the future, it's just a couple decades, I think, even. Because if that's like either 2070 or 2170, I might mix it up with Mass Effect now, I'm sorry. But it is standard, and it has been got worse over the last years. Scientists, they want to publish. You need to throw out papers, especially if you work somewhere in a science community. They actually demand that you have publication history, so a lot of papers are produced. And I can guarantee you that scientists that have been sent or wanted to work on Pandora, they're going to scramble about naming animals. Because that's something that you can easily publish. You can have like multiple papers about different species, and all you have to do is, of course, describe the animal, and then like, okay, I'm going to choose this and this name. And then later on, you can do like genetic testing on them to see like, okay, is this the scarab crawler? We put it in the same genus. I'm going to ignore the certain one as a whipfang crawler. Are they really related? Because, with genetics coming up and DNA, a lot of animals thought to be related are actually not that closely related or even related at all. Because, again, we have our old friend, convergent evolution, showing up again. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you learned a little bit about how names are important. Of course, personal names and common names are as important sometimes as having a scientific name. But if, again, as I said, common names, they can have multiple meanings. For example, huntsman or daddy longlegs, they can describe multiple spider species that are even not that closely related. But then again, we have the scientific names. And again, I'm by no means, an expert in Avatar lore. But of course, from what I've seen, they pretty much lack on that. So I wish they would have, added a little bit more detail. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I, go through the world with open eyes. I know it's not that usual, more exploratory content. But I felt it was important to mention it. And I do hope you have a nice day. And with that, I say bye.